Well, hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Comedy Nerdcast. Today's episode is all about stupidity. And comedy has a long tradition of stupidity. Writers and performers learned from the earliest days of vaudeville and variety that dumb characters could get big laughs from oblivious stares and non sequitur replies. And it didn't take long for radio, television, and the movies to follow suit. The Three Stooges' whole routine was based around them being mentally subpar. Now, whether they got that way from hitting each other in the heads with hammers, or they hit each other in the heads with hammers because they were like that already, well, that's just one of those questions you'll have to ask God when you die. And then after the Stooges came Abbott and Costello, and they established the tradition of the dumb guy who's so dumb he thinks he's smart, and another guy who's so dumb that he also thinks that first guy is smart. So he helps him with all of his terribly ill-conceived, doomed-to-fail schemes. Then there was Hunt Hall from the Bowery Boys, who played a well-meaning nitwit, just a couple of Bowerys short of a ghetto. And Jerry Lewis, who had the kind of stupidity that could have been cured with Adderall. And then Cheech and Chong, whose stupidity came from their own cure for the boredom of life before the internet. And today, we take ignorant pause to celebrate the dum-dums, the doofuses, and the brain-dead dolts of the small screen in an episode we're calling Television's Top 12 Funniest Stupid Idiots. Comedy Nerd. Starting the list at number 12... is Cat Valentine from Victorious and its spin-off Sam and Cat. Now you might know Ariana Grande as the sweet-voiced pop singer with the I Dream of Jeannie ponytail, or you may know her as a donut-licking, Pete Davidson-dumping sociopath. But, as with most celebrities, the truth probably lies somewhere in between. There was nothing ambiguous, however, about Cat, the lovably loopy character that first made Grande a star with young viewers of Nickelodeon's wacky teen kidcoms. Kat was one of those well-intentioned dingbats who wasn't so much dumb as she was dumb about people, and places, and things. She was a sweet, naive ditz who just kind of existed in her own sweet, naive little world, oblivious to meanness and prone to saying random silly things that made sense in a context that only she understood. Basically, if Phoebe and Joey from Friends had a baby, it would be Kat. And Grande, who's also given memorably comedic performances in things like Scream Queens and the Hairspray Live musical on NBC, played the role with a comic ease that makes us wish she showed up in more funny stuff as an actress. And who knows, maybe that I Dream of Jeannie reboot is just around the corner. Number 11. Peter Tork from the Monkees, played by Peter Tork from the Monkees. Now, the common myth is that the Monkees each played a version of themselves on their eponymous TV show, which, like most Hollywood myths, is based 10% in some version of the truth and 90% in whatever a drunken Shelley Winters decided to make up and blab to Johnny Carson in front of 50 million viewers. This particular misconception, though, is based almost entirely on the fact that the Monkees used their own names instead of character names on the series. So the kids watching at home made very little distinction between the actors, who actually went out on tour and played Monkees concerts, and their fictional counterparts who romped around to those same songs on TV every week. And you can't really blame them. The 60s was already a confusing time to be 10. There were drugs, race riots, Vietnam, this new thing called Nerf, and Tiny Tim running around. I mean, we were all confused in those days. But the Monkees' lovably dim-witted bassist Peter Tork probably got the worst end of that red rubber ball of confusion. Tork had come into his audition for the Monkees with a fully formed character, and one that had amused coffeehouse audiences up and down Greenwich Village. He played a very clever cross between Tommy Smothers and Harpo Marx. But when the Monkees went to series, the writer's room actually had a big discussion about whether to make his character an eccentric idiot savant or just the regular kind of idiot. In the end, they decided they could get more one-liner mileage out of making him dumb. And they did. Peter's well-meaning but dull-minded innocent was a highlight of the show's campy vaudeville routine and a funny counterpoint to the other boys' smartassery and snark. And to his great credit, despite his true intelligence and his reservations about a whole generation of pre-teeny bop middle schoolers believing he was probably being driven to the set every day on a short bus, Peter Tork the performer went all in and gave television one of its most lovable and smartly rendered dumb acts of all time. And coming in at number 10...
Number 10.
We hired that guy special for today's show, by the way. Let's give him a little workout. And again, at number 10...
Number 10.
It's Charlie Kelly from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Like a lot of characters in sitcom land, Charlie Kelly started out as a moderately dumb doofus who got stupider and stupider with each new season. And in Charlie's case, his IQ fell faster than Mac on an ice rink. Eventually, Patty's Pub's favorite rat-killing janitor and America's most beloved stalker was an illiterate, hammer-wielding maniac who didn't even know how to eat a pear. And thankfully, the dumber and weirder Charlie got, the funnier Charlie Day grew at playing him. And as the whole Sunny universe grew more self-contained and surreal, Day tapped into increasingly inventive ways to both write and portray his adorably addle-minded and surprisingly emotionally complex character. And in a lot of ways, Charlie is the moral center and the hero of the whole show. And subsequently, Charlie's given the genre of dumb guy comedy some of its brightest dim moments. Number 9.
Number 9.
Oh, you threw a curveball that time.
Number 9. Number 9.
At number 9,
Number 9.
it's Michael Scott from The Office. Michael Scott is horrifically emblematic of a decades-long trend in the American workplace of promoting a person who's good at one job to a position of managing other people doing that same job. And as we saw week after week on the US version of The Office, being great at sales does not make you inherently great at managing salespeople, or distribution coordinators, or QA reps, or customer service agents, or warehouse guys. But Dunder Mifflin's eternal paper cut was our comedic gain. Now, unlike a lot of insensitive bosses, Michael's lack of political correctness and genuinely hurtful dumbassery don't come entirely from him just being an uncaring asshole. He's mostly an asshole because he suffers from the affliction of just being too stupid to not be selfish. It is to Michael's benefit, though, that he is played by the brilliantly funny and soulful-eyed Steve Carell, who somehow manages to imbue his great comic creation with a humanity that makes you feel for the guy, even as he's emotionally abusing his subordinates. And Carell knew how to wring every laugh from awkward moments and Michael's blissfully ignorant cluelessness. But seriously, if you knew Michael Scott in person, you surely would have punched him in the face by now. Or invited him to your next Promise Keepers meeting. Either way, in or out of the office, he is hilariously bad company. In at number 8, it's Chrissy Snow from Three's Company. The dumb blonde is a cliche as old as peroxide, but every now and then a dumb blonde is so stunningly dumb that she jiggles her way into the hearts of men everywhere and gives deeply insecure, swinging American playboys what they desire most: a woman with the body of a 19-year-old and the brain of a baby. I'd like to say there was more to Jack Tripper and Janet Woods' three-mate roomie than TNA and the ability to wreak misunderstanding from even the simplest of situations, but I'd be lying to your face like you were Mr. Roper. Suzanne Summers, on the other hand, the brains behind the beauty, played every doe-eyed blink, every pouty lip quiver, and every drooling mongoloid-like stare with a dreamy vanilla charm that gave the character a soul and delivered every line with the comedic timing of a classic vaudevillian. She also added a snorting giggle to render Chrissy even more dorky to offset her beauty, and as the show went on, the writers recognized Summers' depth of talent and began to give Chrissy's character more insightful and offhandedly intelligent things to say. So she's one of the few sitcom dummies who actually got smarter as the series went on. Then she demanded more money and they replaced her with like 10 other blonde actresses. But love it or hate it, Three's Company brought a style of classic farce to U.S. sitcoms, and Suzanne Summers was a perfect comedian for that genre. And the show was never quite as good without her. Number 7.
Number 7.
Vinnie Barbarino from Welcome Back, Kotter. Years before Vincent Vega became the poster gift for confused, bewildered heroin addicts on first dates, John Travolta was already making stupidity sexy with his remedial class hottie, 24-year-old high school sophomore, Vinnie Barbarino. As the leader of the Sweat Hogs, Buchanan High's resident gang of learning disabled misfits, Vinnie was the only one who was actually just straight up dumb. The other characters were inhibited by emotional and environmental issues that stemmed from growing up impoverished in broken homes in a violent neighborhood. But Vinnie? Well, he was just born remedial. And Travolta's penchant for playing the character even dumber than they'd envisioned became quickly evident to the show's writers, who soon gave him a bevy of funny catchphrases that all revolved around his genuine idiocy or his savant-like talent for playing dumb to get out of having to deal with, life and stuff. TV writers had catchphrase fever in the 70s. In fact, every character on Kotter had 10 of them, but Travolta had a prodigiously funny and charming way with each and every one of his. They were a huge hit with the in-studio audience every time he busted one out. Eventually, the character was so stupid that it made perfect sense when the producers had Barbarino drop out of school altogether and get a full-time job in order to accommodate the actor's real-life movie commitments. And again, to his credit as a comedic actor, what Travolta did was no easy feat, despite maybe him making it seem that way from afar. But if you actually watch episodes of Kotter, and then watch Grease and Saturday Night Fever, and even Pulp Fiction, you'll see that he plays dents differently in each character, and brings a whole new essence of duh to each and every one of them. Number 6.
Number 6.
Gracie Allen from The Burns and Allen Show. Gracie Allen is a classic among classics. Like the Monkees' Peter Tork, she played a character who shared her name, but did not reflect her true intellect. The difference, though, was that her fans weren't 10-year-olds, so they could tell the difference. Gracie was the first and most famous of the Dumb Doras, a vaudeville invention that played a lung-headed character against a straight character who balanced the comedy of the act with their slow burn and frustrated reactions versus the silliness and absurdist humor of their partner. In the beginning, though, Burns and Allen had it backwards. George was playing the doofy husband while Gracie played the incredulous, unamused wife. When they flipped the dynamic around and she became the literal-minded ditz while he shrugged and winked at the audience, they became superstars. She would go on to perfect the character in every medium, bringing the role to its biggest and most adoring audiences on radio and early television. And the Burns and Allen Show, and in particular Gracie's comedy, still hold up today as a deliriously dizzy diversion. She passed on, sadly, at a fairly young age from a lifelong heart condition, and it took George nearly a decade to figure out who he was as a comedian without her. Now, before we sink into the single-digit IQs of our top 5 dum-dums, let's take a quick, stupid look at those characters just barely too smart to make the top 10. These are the best of the rest.
The best of the rest.
First up is Andy Dwyer. Parks and Rec's resident doofus and occasional government employee and fake FBI agent, is more of an overgrown man-child than he is a dur idiot. So while Andy can always be counted on to say the dumbest possible thing at the worst possible time, just like the Pawnee police force, he doesn't quite have the temperament to make our top 12 list. Another best of the rest, Edith Bunker. Archie Bunker's long-suffering wife was the original dingbat and certainly no scholar, but she did have the smarts enough not only to put Archie in his place every now and then, but also to die first, leaving Archie alone with his racism and bigotry and a lifetime of regrets for having been such a dick of a husband. So for that final kick-ass chess move, Edith is deemed not dingy enough to officially land on our stupid idiots list. Well played, Edith. Well played. The next dipshit to miss the list is Gilligan. Now, Gilligan may have had his own island, but he was no Mr. Rourke. But, despite his infuriating penchant for ruining his fellow castaways' best laid escape plans at the very last minute, he can't be a total coconut head, because Gilligan was somehow clever enough to fulfill every young boy's desire of marooning himself on an uncharted island with two of the most beautiful beach bunnies to ever grace the small screen, and managed to keep them there for like 50 years in syndication. So purposeful or not, that's a primo dude move, so Gilligan does not make the top 12. Also missing the list is Kelly Bundy. Married with Children's eldest kid was not your average dumb blonde. While she may have played dumb, and confused, and unable to be properly educated, her put-downs of her kid brother Bud were genuinely witty. So we know there was a gleam of smarts lurking somewhere behind that rocker chick mascara and gigantic 80s hair. So, just like the Dean's list, Kelly misses ours as well. And then there's Officer Bar Brady. Officer Bar Brady may be the dumbest person in South Park, and that includes Mimsy and Randy. Officer Bar Brady is a functionally illiterate, voice modulation impaired moron who couldn't catch a brazen animal fornicator without the help of foul-mouthed 8-year-old kids. But he is a Fiona Apple fan, which means he's got something going on upstairs that makes him at least a tad too smart for our top 12. Or at least his musical taste is too smart. And now a few quick honorable mentions to some more stupid idiots who just missed the mark. Ed Norton from The Honeymooners, the original Boob Tube Boob, the great Art Carney, practically wrote the book on being a dumb sidekick. It's just too bad so few of them can actually read it. Mallory Keaton and Nick from Family Ties. Family Ties was one of those shows where, once the writers figured out each actor's comedic strengths and rhythms, they started changing the characters to suit them, and everyone got way more over the top. And fortunately for us, that made the show even funnier. Mallory wasn't dumb in the early seasons of Family Ties so much as she was disinterested in being smart. But after falling in love with monosyllabic artist Nick, the two became the funniest couple of dimwits this side of Bill and Ted. And there's also Lowell from Wings. Lowell, as played by Thomas Hayden Church, was as delightfully dense as the pile of sand he played in Spider-Man 3. But hey, at least he wasn't as dumb as the network executives who thought Ned and Stacy was a good idea.
90s humor.
There's also Ted Baxter, the Mary Tyler Moore Show's ridiculously arrogant anchorman. He was a precursor to Ron Burgundy and just as hilariously obtuse. Brought to cartoony life by the great Ted Knight, Baxter's comedy came from his complete lack of self-awareness and an almost absolute intellect deficiency. He was both book dumb and street dumb. And then there was Boner Stabone. As if being best friends with Kirk Cameron wasn't proof enough of some severely loose screws, Dumb Dora sidekick Boner was also saddled with the worst nickname this side of Stinky Sullivan. Pinky from Pinky and the Brain. Even for a mouse, the Brain's brain-dead partner had a tiny IQ, but he was one of those characters who was so dumb that he was often the voice of reason when the Brain's latest plan to take over the world began to grow out of control. So sometimes there's an upside to having someone around who's not ingenious enough to crave world domination. I hear Dan Quayle served the same role for President Bush.
80s humor.
There's also DJ Connor. While we can never forgive Roseanne's writers for what they did to the original show's final season, we will always be enamored of their choice to turn a young Michael Fishman's limited acting abilities into comedy gold by making DJ Connor one of the weirdest and dead-eyed kids ever to dwell outside the Addams Family mansion. And on the Connors, a now grown-up Fishman plays the vacant kid as a vacant adult to comedic perfection. There was also Joey from Blossom. Joey Lawrence's perennially sleeveless big brother was so dumb, he didn't realize his entire being was ripped off from Vinnie Barbarino. And Michael Kelso from That 70s Show. Ashton Kutcher's lung-headed 70s hunk was a himbo with a heart of horny teenage boy gold, and Kutcher played the part so convincingly that he married his leading lady and genuinely shocked the world when he came out as smart. And now, back to our top 5.
Back to the top 5.
Back to the top 5.
And taking an elaborate 13-story elevator ride to number 5 is Maxwell Smart from Get Smart. Maxwell Smart was destined to be funny. He was the brainchild of Mel Brooks and Buck Henry, and was living proof of the Dunning-Kruger effect. A Jason Bourne-like savant when it came to hand-to-hand combat and scrambling in and out of sticky situations. Agent 86 was a complete moron in every other conceivable way, but never let a lack of smarts keep him from thinking highly of himself. A legend in his own mind, and to those who only knew the myths that surrounded him, Max was an arrogant idiot who insisted on doing things by the book, even in the face of ridiculously unreasonable odds, and typically survived to see another day thanks to blind luck and the devoted assistance of his partner, Agent 99. Played to pitch-perfect incompetence by nightclub comic Don Adams, Maxwell Smart was the kind of hilariously aloof idiot who bumbled his way through life, almost always did the exact wrong thing in every situation, and somehow still managed to come up smelling like a rose with a microphone hidden in it. Huh, I have some relatives like that. Only not as funny. Maybe if they came with a laugh track. Yeah, there you go. In at number 4, it's Woody Boyd from Cheers. Cheers had already given us the wonderfully dizzy dementia of Nicholas Colasanto's coach. And when they needed to replace him, they reincarnated his sweet, naive spirit as young Indiana hayseed Woody Boyd. Endless tales of small-town life in the idyllic yet sometimes shockingly macabre Hanover, Indiana, illuminated the fact that Woody was that special kind of dumb that you get from a country mouse in the city, and his fish-out-of-water routine played effortlessly against the established backdrop of Cheers' Beantown Bar and added a dimension to the series that served up a whole new brew of humor. That was kind of the beauty of Cheers, though. It had mixed elements of high and lowbrow comedy so effectively already that adding an ingredient like Woody in the 4th season didn't seem disruptive at all. In fact, it seemed expansive, like a head of foam rising from a freshly topped-off mug. And the fresh-faced Woody Harrelson played the character as lovable but with an edge. Where Coach was dim but fatherly, Woody was polite and subservient, but frisky and little brother-like, with the rambunctious energy of a newly hatched alien running rampant through the halls of Area 51. And though he was wide-eyed to the ways of city life, he had a yearning for adventure and sophistication, and an artistic streak that led him to bad acting and terrible songwriting. Woody was already conceived on paper as a fairly multifaceted character, and Harrelson's ability to play all those layers was truly fun to watch. He made the character adorably earnest and endlessly optimistic, but also made him believably prankish and up for a rowdy time. And even though he was slow on the uptake, even by Indiana standards, am I right? The addition of Woody to the cast of Cheers was darn smart comedy. And we're down to number 3. Rose Nyland from The Golden Girls. Betty White had made a career of playing sassy horn dogs who slung martinis and dry backhanded insults with the ease of Billie Jean King besting an exhausted Bobby Riggs. So to see her play the innocent, sheltered, dunder-headed Rose on The Golden Girls was both a roar and a revelation. And Rose fell into a category of dum-dum more as a result of having been sheltered, first by her father and then by her husband, rather than from having a truly low IQ. But the laughs at her expense were still just as stupidly fun. And the insanely old-fashioned and surreal-seeming world of her cult-like hometown, St. Olaf, added a dimension of weird origin story to an already intriguingly dingy worldview that made Rose second only to Dwight Schrute as the sitcom character most likely to travel back in time and fit right in. Her character, too, served as the perfect comic foil for the other girls, especially B. Arthur's always zing-ready Dorothy Zbornak. Rose's habit of asking ridiculously obvious questions gave easy setups to snappy Zbornakian comebacks that the audience could see coming a mile away, but still love the hell out of anyway. I mean, we all know Christmas is coming every year, but we still love getting the presents. And Betty White in the new millennium has become something of a folk hero, a beloved national treasure whose real-life sass and spunk lie in perfect contrast to her most famous characters' fuddy-duddiness and naivete, proving once again that in comedy there are no absolutes, but in life there is apparently one. We all love Betty White any way she wants to be. And finding himself at number 2 is Joey Tribbiani from Friends. Joey was another character who started out a little slow and got slower and slower over the seasons until he was practically molasses, or in Joey's case, delicious meatball sandwich goo. He very quickly, though, became one of television's most original lunkheads with a comedic rhythm sandwiched someplace between Danny Zuko and that weird Muppet who throws fish. Matt LeBlanc brought an unexpectedly odd little boy element to the character that offset the conceited Lothario side and opened Joey up to more absurdist storylines and offbeat dialogue. He added depth when needed, but mostly kept the character light as a default dynamic, which allowed him to exist comedically apart from whatever drama was unfolding between Ross and Rachel. Basically, Joey could be preoccupied with a jar of jam in the middle of a Cloverfield attack, and it wouldn't disrupt the reality of the show in any way. All of this added up to a character who could remain loved by friends and fans alike, despite being immaturely callous and superficial, and someone who valued sandwiches more than human beings. Speaking of Joey's less childlike side, there are some negative Nancys who like to claim that Joey's lack of smarts rendered him so lovable that we all gleefully overlooked years of supposedly predatory and emotionally abusive behavior towards the women of New York. But those who claim Joey's sexcapades went unpunished have conveniently forgotten that the character, in the end, was sentenced to spend eternity on the spin-off Joey. And that's cruel and unusual enough for any crime. At least the big lug was probably too dumb to realize what a bad show it was. And that brings us to our number 1 dummy. The one, the only, the ridiculously stupid Homer J. Simpson. Homer Simpson is the dumbest man in America. He is consequently the crudest, the rudest, the selfishest, and the funniest. Homer is like all the other characters on this list rolled up into one big, fat, donut-loving, beer-swilling, job-loafing, Marge-snuggling oaf. Voiced and characterized by the amazing Dan Castellaneta, Homer is a walking, nose-whistling, finger-drumming, pencil-snapping metaphor for all the worst traits of the American worker and family member. What we love about Homer, though, as a protagonist, is that he lives his life without fear of consequences, and indulges in unbridled hedonism with absolutely no thought of tomorrow, or of anything at all. But that he is also a surprisingly sensitive softie who loves his family and sometimes tries to do the right thing. What we find funny about Homer is that his dumb Dora replies are ridiculously absurd and unpredictable, that his physical being is somehow both light as a feather dancing on the wind and heavy as a sack of bricks crashing through 10 china cabinets, and that his dim bulb perception of the world around him is wonderfully, hilariously skewed by his complete lack of interest in anything that doesn't make him instantly and immeasurably happy. Ultimately, Homer is the pantsless inner child that runs around somewhere in all of our subconsciouses, demanding beer and TV and louder cries until we all just cave in and kill Flanders dead. And that level of truth is what great comedy, no matter how smart or dumb, is all about. So that concludes our list of television's 12 funniest stupid idiots. We hope you enjoyed the show and that you follow us on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite listening platform. and that you join the discussion in the Comedy Nerd Facebook group. And let us know if you liked our list. If we left anyone out of the top 12 you thought should have been included, let us know. Until next time, keep an eye on the people in your life and be sure to share a joke when somebody needs it. And remember, the lesson we learned today is that it's always okay to laugh at a stupid person as long as they're too stupid to notice. Comedy Nerd.